Hey there. Hey there. Good morning. So, today I want to talk about children who are struggling with emotion dysregulation problems. If you are a child and adolescent therapist, and if you're a play therapist, then you have these children on your caseload. And so, to me, these are the children whose parents are looking to you to help their child. They are looking to you to fix the problem. These are parents that are overwhelmed. Their child is kind of like a tiny tornado at home, or maybe an adolescent tornado with their anger and their outbursts, and maybe not doing what parents need them to do. Parents are worried. These are children who parents feel like they just are not sure what to do anymore. They may even worry that their child is a future sociopath just because they just are at their wits' end and don't know what to do. So they're coming to you and they need you to help them figure out what's going on and to help their child so that their child can get better and regulate their emotions. These are children that struggle with peer relationships. They maybe have trouble forming healthy relationships with their peers. Maybe they get bullied a lot. Maybe they are the bully. Their self-esteem is terrible. And parents are burned out, overwhelmed, and totally at a loss. And they may even have teachers calling them and telling them about their child, and their child's not doing well at school. So they are sitting in your office. Parents are looking at you, and you're the expert, and they want you to fix it. So, what do you do? And this episode, I want to talk about one kind of a reminder of things we learned in graduate school that I see oftentimes getting forgotten, or maybe you get busy and you don't necessarily think about it because you don't have a lot of time. The thing that I want to talk about today is actually going to save you time, and it's actually going to help you be less burned out and overwhelmed yourself when you're working with really challenging clients. Hey, Carla, Centro Grow. And hey, Carla, it's so good to see you. So, Carla was in my training last week. I got to know Carla in my attachment focused family play session. She is an amazing play therapist in Mexico. It was really cool seeing you and seeing you here. So awesome. So, Carla, I am imagining you probably have some of the children with emotion regulations on your caseload. Um, over the last 30 years in the mental health field, and prior to becoming a clinical social worker, I worked as a special education teacher, and I worked in a special ed program, special education program for children with emotional problems. So I've been around these kids and their families, honestly, since the early 1980s. Um, and what I've learned over that this like 35, 40 years now, going on 30 in the mental health field. And so I want to share today some of the things that I've learned, actually three things that I want to share to really help you hone your skills to, one, get much greater results, get much better results by kind of going back and thinking about some things you probably learned in graduate school and maybe haven't been integrating as much since graduate school, but it will save you time. It will help you hone in on what the problem is, and it will help you from getting kind of overwhelmed yourself with these clients, because they can be overwhelming. Because the other thing that I want to do is I want to talk about kind of like a tried and true thing we learned in graduate school and are probably not doing now. a new lens to look at, and I want to challenge the traditional way of doing things. Carla probably knows what I'm going to be talking about with that one because you were in my training last weekend. Um, but I want to challenge the traditional play therapy way of doing things. So first, though, I want to see who's here. So every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, I go live into LinkedIn, my YouTube channel, my Facebook group for child and adolescent therapists using play therapy. If you're on Facebook and you want to be part of my Facebook group, it's a free group. It is called Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. You do have to make sure you answer the questions, though, in order to get into the group. And I also stream live simultaneously into Instagram. So I go live every week and talk about all things play therapy and expressive arts. And today I want to talk about children who are struggling with emotion regulation problems. And what I've learned I have an online play therapy supervision group, and I also do quite a few live webinar trainings. And I do have a training coming up in December on December 3rd that I will talk about some more at the end of today's live stream. And that training really focuses on helping you get really good results with these challenging children, helps you use a framework that's going to really target what the roots of the problem are. And then how can you use a framework that is going to help get better results? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things in today's live stream, because I'm like, since the early 80s, I have worked with these clients and their parents. And in 30 years in mental health, these kids have been on my caseload because I've always been a child and adolescent therapist. And this is my 30 years of wisdom that I have kind of put together and figured out a really good way of getting good results. Because to me, we get into this profession because we want to help. And being able to see that transformation for clients is so, so rewarding. And that's what I want to help you to do. I want to take my 40 years of experience and help you get really good results for your clients. So hi, LinkedIn user. So it just says LinkedIn user. I can't see who you might have. So just FYI, live stream, not on Instagram. On Instagram, you have to do it right into Instagram. But on LinkedIn, my Facebook group, and YouTube, I use StreamYard. StreamYard's just a third-party platform that allows me to do all of those at one time. And sometimes you have to give StreamYard permission. All that does is it allows me to see your name. Otherwise, you show up as LinkedIn user, YouTube user, or Facebook user. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd love to know who's here. Go ahead and post your name in the comments, where you're from. I love to see where people are from. To me, it's so cool. I'm kind of nerdy this way. Like, I love seeing what people are doing with play therapy in other countries. That was why it was so cool, Carly, to kind of see what you were doing in Mexico. But it's really cool to see what other people are doing in other countries with play therapy. So I'd love to know where you're from, what population you work with, and do you have children with emotion dysregulation problems on your caseload? And that's what I want to talk about today. So, hey, Mandy. Oh my gosh. Hey, Mandy. How are you? Mandy, okay, you can answer my question that I am dying to know. Are you guys on, did you guys go off daylight savings time? We went off this week, and oh my goodness, I'm so I'm so tired. Like, getting out of bed early this morning was like, oh, I hate when they do the time change. I think you guys changed in the UK also, though, and I think I was giving the wrong times in my Facebook, my social media post these live streams. Um, so Mandy, I'm going to guess you have these clients on your caseload as well. All righty. So let me get started for today. Honestly, what questions you have, feel free to post those. Honestly, feel free to message me. Send me a direct message, send me a message through YouTube, or Mandy, you're also in my Facebook group, I think, as well. Post your questions in there, Mandy, because if you have the questions, other people have questions as well. And he says, yes, you guys went off daylight savings. Yeah, I think you guys are a week ahead of us for going off daylight savings. And I think you go on daylight savings a week before us. Here in the US, some of they're the government, I think state by state, they're thinking about doing away with daylight savings. I think our main federal government, they're talking about it as well. I hope they do. It's so tiring. Um, Anyways, today, here are the things that I really think if you do these three things, then you are going to get some good results with your clients who struggle with emotion dysregulation problems, even more so the more challenging ones. It is heartbreaking to sit across the room with parents who feel like their child's 5 and they just have this deep fear that their child is going to have a terrible life because they can't get these strong emotions under control and they don't know how to help their child. And these are the children that show up in your therapy office. These are the kids that show up in your playroom. And sometimes as therapists, you can get overwhelmed and a little burned out from these clients as well. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So first and foremost, detective mode, going into detective mode. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, first I'll give you a little analogies. This will be a throwback for some of you. Some of you won't know what I'm talking about, especially the younger people. Okay, back in the 1970s, there was a show called Columbo. And Columbo was this unassuming detective. He was like kind of a frumpy guy, not the hot Hollywood types it was Peter Falk was the actor, and he played this detective Columbo. And Detective Columbo he was on the case, solving the murder mystery, solving the case, and he would ask questions, just being curious, but he would get into the details. Like he would get into the before and the after and what happened during. And he would be really curious, like, I'm wondering about this, or I'm wondering about that. Or, you said this when that happened. So I'm wondering how this happened. And I think what I've learned, if you use kind of that same detective mode with your clients at the very beginning, and when I say clients, I'm going to say the child is the client, identified client. I find if you look at your child within context of their family system, you're going to get way better information, which is going to give you way better understanding of what is going on so that you can have much better success choosing interventions that are going to make a difference. And so going into detective mode means you are going to, at that very first session with parents only for little kids, at some point, I think it's okay to have the, like a pre-adolescent or an adolescent in there. I found though that if I ask the parent what their comfort level is at the first appointment, you're going to do a lot of history gathering. Tell parents that you're going to take that first session to ask a lot of questions, being really curious about the details of everything. If you ask parents whether or not their and this, I don't do it for little kids. I don't have them in there. I want the freedom and the privacy to have that conversation with parents. Kids get really uncomfortable with that discussion, and I want parents to be able to speak freely because I want to get a sense of where they're coming from and what some of their concerns are that they don't necessarily want to say in front of their kids. Some of them are saying these things in front of their kids because they're not necessarily understanding the full impact. But if, like, for teenagers and maybe those middle, like the pre-teens, 10, 11, 12, 13 age, I tend to ask parents if they think their child can tolerate having that discussion. And I get a sense of what parents' comfort level is, because otherwise the child's going to be in there and the parent's going to be like doing this and kind of whispering things to you, like the child doesn't know what they're thinking. You know what I mean? It's just a really uncomfortable situation. So that very first session, take the time to do that really thorough history gathering. And there are 3 words that I want you to burn into your brain when you're asking about symptoms. I want you to think about these 3 things for every symptom: frequency, intensity, and duration. Frequency: how often does it occur? Does it occur a couple times a week, a couple times a day? How long does it last? Does it last like 10 minutes? Does it last an hour? Does it last all day? How intense is it? So if it's, I use a 10-point scale. Here's the scale that I use. I'll say I have the scale. It's a 0 to 10 scale. 0 means it doesn't bother you at all. 10 means it's so bad you think your head's going to pop off. So on a scale of 0 to 10, on average, how bad would you say the emotional outbursts are? And then they'll rate it. That gives you some really good information. It allows you to see how they're perceiving it, how they're experiencing it. Otherwise, we're making a lot of assumptions. And I found if you do this, you get a lot of good information. And I can't tell you how many in my online supervision group, one of the things I feel like is really, really important. So we talk about this a lot in my supervision group. And in fact, in January 2023, I'm going to launch a new series called Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Excellence, all pre-recorded, because what I'm finding is in my supervision groups that people are not necessarily well skilled in case conceptualization. And that is what helps you understand what the problem is. You want to ask, as you're asking frequency, intensity, and duration, you want to ask what tends to happen that activates that. You want to see if you can figure out what some of the triggers are. What situations does it happen at school? Does it happen at home? Does it happen out in the community? Where does it happen? Sometimes it happens at home and in school. Sometimes kids can hold it together at school and they come home and fall apart. That gives you really good information that probably, if it's not happening at home and it's happening at school, then probably these kids are white knuckling it like, internally, holding on all day long until they get home and they can kind of let loose. So you want to find out where it happens, how often it happens, frequency, intensity, and duration. You're thinking about maybe what might be some of the symptoms. Like if you're thinking maybe it's anxiety, you can ask more questions about anxiety, being more curious about these things, just kind of rule that out, so to speak, or depression, or has there been any trauma? You want to ask very specific questions. Here's why. All of that information helps you to conceptualize what's going on with your clients so that you can then formulate a plan. And that's the key. So that's the detective mode. I often find that people skip this step. And so in my online supervision group, what I found, when I, in the beginning, I would ask these questions, frequency, intensity, and duration. They'd have to do their case presentation. And a lot of these questions early on weren't getting asked. And then as the people in my play therapy supervision group, they got better at thinking about that way. They found they were getting better results because they knew what they were targeting, other than just kind of seeing how it goes, taking more of an active leadership role, so to speak, in the beginning makes a huge difference. And so then the second thing is, and to me this is kind of a new way of looking at it, is really using an attachment and neuroscience lens. So, really understanding the neuroscience of emotion regulation, that mind body connection of what's going on in their brain, what's getting triggered, and then physiologically, how is their body responded? Some children are physiologically predisposed to being more easily emotionally triggered. And so I don't know how many times I'm finding over the last 30 years, what I'm about to say has gotten much better. When I was first beginning, I would notice what I was about to say happened a lot, and I had to do a lot of kind of educating myself first, and then educating the people that worked for me and the people that I was supervising and working with, in addition to parents, teachers, other professionals, is understanding that some kids biologically, physiologically, their emotion regulation circuitry is easily activated, maybe more so than typically developing kids. Now there's a lot of conversation in the field about neurodivergent children. So here's the thing, those were my kids. I grew up in a household where I am like I am certain one of my siblings had ADHD, and or still does, and emotion regulation comes along with that. We often forget with ADHD the executive function component of emotion regulation, and then even that mind body component of, even in the body, what that feels like when your neurocircuitry is kind of always running hot all the time. It's overwhelming to these kids. And then you add on that other types of sensory processing problems, or some other things that they're struggling with, like maybe kids on the autism spectrum, they get kind of stuck and rigid in their thinking. They don't shift gears very well. Kids with ADHD don't shift gears very well. So I've seen firsthand in my own life growing up, and then my own children, we know these things are passed along. ADHD is one of those things. Plus you add giftedness in there. Like one of my kids is ADHD and gifted. So and so these, for these children, life can be really a struggle. And if we don't really help parents and educate ourselves about that mind body connection, understand the neuroscience of emotion regulation, understanding the role of emotion, the role of attachment in emotion regulation, and that the way that shows up is co-regulation. How do we help parents understand their role as co-regulators? Children don't have the neurocircuitry that's matured for emotion regulation. They rely on their parents to help with that co-regulation, to lay down that neurocircuitry. So that's an important piece, that if we look at and we understand emotion regulation from a neuroscience, that mind body connection, then we get we look at the behavior not as children being willful or children being bad. Or I'll tell you what, back in the, like when my kids were growing, this was in the 90s, probably even in the 80s, there was this whole terminology used about the strong-willed child. And I had those kids, and I hated that term, strong-willed. I just found it, I'm going to pull out one of my big words, egregious. Here's why. Because strong-willed was so negative. It didn't capture their kindness. It didn't capture their gentleness. It didn't capture the fascinating way that their mind put things together. It didn't capture how much it affected them emotionally, that they struggled to get themselves to do what seemed so easy for everybody else. So that term, strong-willed, I hate that term. And I'm glad we've moved away from it. I'm glad there's much more of a focus about neurodiversity and understanding really the neuroscience of it. And then also, I think one of the things in the play therapy field, and this is what I'm going to talk about next, which is the third thing, is really using a different approach with these children. So the typical approach is an individual play therapy focus. That's the typical focus. And I still use that. So I'm not saying we want to throw it out. I still use it as well. I'll use just individual sessions with clients, like the first 90 days at least. But here's the other thing, because I am a firm believer that parents, guardians need to be involved in the process. I require parents to meet with me at least once a month without the child, so that I can develop rapport with them. I want to help them understand co-regulation, and I'm going to begin to work with them about their role and helping to support parents to be more involved and successful, giving parents the skills that they need so they can confidently help support their child throughout their lives. And that's the thing, using a neuroscience and attachment framework in play therapy means that you're going to do things a little differently than the traditional play therapy individual every week. And you do like maybe 5-minute check-ins. They're never 5 minutes. I call those like drive-through parenting sessions. They're not my favorite. And here's why, because I did them and they weren't very effective, not to the extent they needed to be. And so what I learned is having an intentional plan with a framework based on theory and informed by neuroscience that backs up my framework. Meaning, the reason that's important is because I know when I use it, it's grounded in theory. It's informed by research. It works. It's not just something I made up and I don't know whether it works. It's something I know that works because I see it happening, and I know it works because there's been research to support what I'm saying. And so having a framework, and that's one of the things, like the training that I developed. So taking my 40 years, 35, 40 years working with children with emotion regulation problems, and in the last 30 in mental health, specifically as a child and adolescent therapist, the framework that I kind of came up with is based on that experience to get really good results, because it takes that neuroscience and attachment theory and research and kind of gives you a way of being and a way of helping your clients, making sure you're on target with your play therapy approaches. So using your play therapy activities and strategies within this framework, I call it the CAPES framework. CAPES. CAPES is using curiosity, the Columbo mode. A is attunement and authenticity. That's the attachment piece. P is play. So that having those therapeutic powers of play and helping parents understand how integrating playfulness and those therapeutic powers of play can really help them in their relationship. Plus, we're using that in the therapy sessions with their kids. E is have an environmental context, how asking those questions about what activates, where do these emotions get activated, how do parents address them, what have they tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Here's the thing, when you ask what's worked and what have they tried, make sure you ask them how long they've tried this, because a lot of times after one or two times they get overwhelmed and kind of fearful that it's not going to work and nothing's going to work. But maybe it did, but it takes time for kids to make that shift. So you want to ask, so environmental context, does it happen at school? Where else does it happen? What activates it? Finding out what those triggers are. And then the S is structuring the sessions, structuring the pacing, structuring who's involved and how they're involved in the session, all of those things. So the CAPES framework is really a way to take most people use in play therapists. Most of you are using an integrated approach like most of us do. What I found, if I have like a framework to kind of pop those in where they seem like they're going to be most effective, then that adds a lot more consistency in my approach along the way. And I have these things that I can think about when I'm doing that decision making. So having a framework, and that's what so in the training that I have coming up, it's called CAPES, a framework using play therapy with challenging children and teens. That's going to be coming up on December 3rd. It's a live webinar. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the thing is, if you have a framework, then that helps you determine what theoretical model you're using, how you're applying it, how you're showing up in the play therapy sessions, how you're understanding what the problem is. So like child-centered play therapy is going to conceptualize the problem and one way, and then it kind of dictates how you show up in the sessions, how you talk, even the phases of treatment. That's going to be a little different than maybe if you're using Gestalt play therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. Most of us will integrate different models in there based on, so that we can really individualize the approach that we're taking with our clients. So that is it for today. Just a little recap. First and foremost, detective mode, frequency, duration, and intensity. What activates the emotion dysregulation? So what are the triggers? How often does it happen? Where does it happen? How does it get handled? How do people respond? What's the impact? Exploring all of those things, so you're making sure you gather that information at that biopsychosocial assessment. Ask about developmental history, ask about in utero, any experiences, ask about all those early developmental milestones. That gives you good information. Don't skip those. And then that helps you better understand what's going on with your client. The thing is, you're always in detective mode. Like, it's not one and done. It's not, okay, I did it here, I don't have to do it again. You're always in detective mode throughout the treatment process, especially in the beginning as you're getting to better understand what's going on with your client, and parents are developing that rapport with you to kind of help you understand. Kids are developing that safety with you. And Carla said, love that training. Yes, the last weekend I did attachment focused family play therapy. So that one uses an attachment and neuroscience lens as well. And we did a full day. We walked through all the treatment process. Carla, you are doing some really cool and creative things with your clients. So it was really cool to hear that. Um, and then the second thing is, if you're using a neuroscience and attachment lens to understand the behavior, then that means you're also thinking about the physiological and that neurobiological component of emotion regulation and the role of attachment for co-regulation, helping parents or guardians understand that children are developing their their emotion regulation circuitry, and that's developing, and that'll develop all the way through into young adulthood. Like, our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until we're in our mid to late 20s. And the prefrontal cortex is part of the emotion regulation circuitry. So, helping parents understand their role means you need to use a framework that's going to help you, one, understand why all of that's going on and how co-regulation is an important part of the process. And then the final thing is really maybe not necessarily using the strictly traditional approach of individual therapy only, and maybe here or there check in with the parents using like in the CAPES framework. I talk a lot about having parents developing that strong relationship with parents to help them understand co-regulation, their role as co-regulators, how to do that, and their ability to be skills coaches. What I mean by that is, if you integrate parents more into the treatment process, even into the sessions itself, one, it's going to cut down on in between. I forgot to mention this earlier. It's going to cut down on your burnout because they're going to be calling you in between sessions. You're going to be texting and emailing. Don't do that. Don't text them and email them between sessions, because it's not the most effective way to communicate and develop rapport with parents. Plus, it's in between all that time when you're supposed to be getting your progress notes done. If you have a strategic plan where you know you're meeting with parents on a regular basis, and that's where you do all those conversations, then you're not going to have to do the in-between stuff. It's going to be more private and secure because you don't know who's going to be seeing that conversation. You don't know how they're making sense of it. Like, maybe you're saying something, you don't know if they're taking it a different way. But most importantly, you're also not really building that rapport when you get them face to face, even through teletherapy, in a dedicated session where you are building rapport, you are building trust with your parents, the parents of your clients. So Mark says, anything that helps sick and struggling children is a blessing. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, that's one of the things, as play therapists, as mental health professionals, really, that's the goal. That's why we do this. It's so rewarding to see that change. And to me, if these are children that tend to be overwhelming, not only to their parents, but parents are looking at you. They're looking at you saying, why are you not fixing my kid? My kid isn't fixed. But if you help them and integrate them into the treatment process, you're having regular and dedicated sessions, you're meeting with them, you're having conversations with them, you're integrating them in, then you're going to get much more success. And that's a lot of what we talk about in the CAPES training that's coming up in December. We're talking about the neuroscience and attachment function aspects of emotion regulation, so that you can then use strategies and have a way of working with parents and the children that are going to help you be more effective. And being more effective means your clients are going to be more successful. They're going to get the change that they need. And that is amazing to watch. That is definitely an amazing thing to witness that transformation. So Central going, Carla says another training. Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about the training and then we will wrap up. So it's called CAPES. The training, it's a full day online live webinar. We're going to be talking about what types of mental health issues that may be underlying emotion regulation. Because to me, if you better understand like how these mental health issues show up with children, then it's going to help you figure out which way that you need to go. Oh, thanks, Chloe. So Chloe enjoyed. Oh, Chloe from Sussex. That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining. And feel free, if you find the information helpful today, feel free to like it and share this content. You can always head over to my YouTube channel, Kathy Spooner, Renewing Hearts. I think it's Renewing Hearts Consulting. All my replays are on there as well. And if you're interested in learning more about the training, honestly, feel free to message me. I'd be happy to send you the link. I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about it. The training that we're going to talk about, the neuroscience and attachment aspects of emotion regulation and co-regulation. And then we're also going to be talking about the framework to use as an integrated approach, the CAPES framework, a lot of experiential activities that you can use. How do you integrate parents more effectively into the treatment process? So if you're interested in that, you can hop over to my website at RRH Counseling. Yep, I think I put that up there. There we go. www.rrhcounseling.com/courses. There are two versions. One version if you want the continuing education hours, and the other one is if you don't need them. Like Carly, you signed up, you didn't need our continuing education hours. That one's a little cheaper than the one with the continuing education hours because not everybody needs those CEs. So anyways, I will see you next time and have a good day. Bye for now. All right.